Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. Today's tree is a very nice, healthy looking Shimpaku juniper, and we're going to talk about harmony with nature. Now, this is one of my favorite topics because at the end of the day, that is what we're really trying to achieve when we do bonsai, is some type of harmony in the tree. But what does that mean? Well, I think it's different for every person. I mean, maybe for some people, they just like really symmetrical trees and that makes them happy. That's their harmony. For other people, they want something a little bit more crazy and asymmetrical. But ultimately, it comes down to the individual and what they find pleasing. But there are some common themes that I see in trees that have good harmony. And I'd like to share some of those with you today. So the first thing is branches, roots, and trunk lines. If you look at this tree from the side view, everything looks pretty straight. And I don't think it's a bad thing to have straight branches. I mean, if you look at a lot of pines, especially Japanese black pines, they tend to have straight branches. But here, every branch is perfectly straight. And the root system looks straight too. It's a very upright grower. And even if we go all the way up into the canopy, we see that the branches are all growing out perfectly horizontal. This is an extreme example of perfect symmetry. And now, like I said, I don't have a problem with this, but I think in this case we could do a little bit better. I'm going to show you what I mean. So if we take this branch right here and we look at how it's growing, it's coming straight up and then it's turning out and going straight again. We can see that in nature, branches rarely grow like this. They usually have these nice sweeping curves to them. Now, this is much closer to what I would call natural. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make the tree look like it grew in nature, not like it was purposely trained by a human hand. The same goes for the roots. In nature, you almost never see perfectly straight roots either. There's always some type of curve or turn to them, so we're going to add a little bit of taper to the roots here. And we can do the same thing with the trunk. When you look at it from the front, it looks totally straight. But if we go around to the back, you can see that it bulges out a little bit, and that's more natural. In nature, the trunks of trees rarely grow perfectly straight. They usually have some type of curve to them. Now, you don't see curves like this very often. This is a very exaggerated S-curve. But if you look at something like an old apple tree, you'll see a more subtle version of this. Now, you might be saying, well, it doesn't really matter, because once we put the tree in a pot, we're going to hide most of those roots, and that's true. But I still think it's important to try to make the roots look as natural as possible because you can still see some of the roots. And also, I think it will help the tree overall. Just like when we add a curve to the branches, it looks more natural. Same thing with the roots. I think it's going to help the whole tree look more natural. So the next thing is the overall shape of the tree. And this tree is a Shimpaku juniper. So it naturally has this nice cascading shape to it. And that's the direction that I'm going to take. But sometimes you see people take juniper trees and they make them into upright trees, and that's fine. But it's not going to look as natural as a tree that's grown in nature, obviously. Again, the key is to try to mimic what happens in nature. So the next thing we want to talk about is foliage and ramification. Now, this tree is absolutely loaded with foliage, which is great. It's a very dense tree and it looks very healthy. But when we start to look at the ramification, we see that it's all kind of the same size needles. We don't see any age variation in the foliage, and we don't see much of a difference between the interior and the exterior needles. Now, sometimes you see people who have trees like this, and they'll purposefully prune off all the interior needles so you can see the trunk, and I'm not saying that's wrong. I mean, sometimes it looks nice, but again, it's not going to look as natural as a tree that has grown on its own without human intervention. Now, you might be saying, well, it doesn't really matter because most bonsai, we do have human intervention. And that's true. But again, the goal is to get the most natural looking tree we can. And I think this would look a lot better if it had some age variation in the foliage. So maybe the interior needles are a little bit longer and the exterior needles are a little bit shorter. And maybe there's some yellow needles that show up in the fall. I think that would be really nice. Now, the last thing we want to talk about is the soil. Now, this tree actually has a really nice soil. It's got a lot of good stuff going on. For one, it's got a lot of rocks, and I think that's great. Rocks are a great addition to any bonsai. They help the tree look more mature, and they also help keep the tree stable. But the soil is a little bit too deep. I mean, if we were looking at this in nature, we would see that there's not a whole lot of soil there at all. Most of the roots are growing in dirt and rock. So the first thing I'm going to do is just pull out some of the soil. Now, once we've done that, we can see the roots a little bit better. We can see that they're growing out, but they're not really going anywhere. They're not really growing in a pot. So we can fix that by adding some more rocks around the edge of the pot. I think this will help give the tree a little bit more stability. And then we're going to top it off with some gravel. This will give it a more natural look. And I think it will help the tree thrive. All right, so let's just take a step back and look at where we started and look at where we are now. We've added some taper to the trunk. We've changed the angle of some of the branches and roots to make them look more natural. We've added some age variation to the foliage. We've made the tree a little bit bushier, and we've also made the soil more natural. Now, at the end of the day, this tree is by no means perfect, but I think it's a good example of harmony with nature. Remember, it's not about controlling nature, it's about working with nature. Try to make your bonsai grow in harmony with the forces of nature, and you'll be rewarded with a beautiful, healthy tree. All right, everyone, that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe. And I'd also like to take a moment to say thank you to our supporters. Your support really helps us produce these videos, so thank you. Until next time, I wish you all the best in your bonsai journey.